Hi, and welcome to Expand with Elevar Partners, a series of online workshops we're hosting with our agency and tech partners. Our goal is to bring you timely, useful, and highly relevant content to help you grow your online store. If you have thoughts, ideas, or questions you'd like us to address, just email us at partners@getelevar.com. Now, on with today's show.
So first of all, I'm going to start while we're waiting for folks to log in. I'm just going to start with some of our housekeeping and a little bit of introduction. And that way, by the time I get done with all of that, probably everybody will be on the line. So, and usually we would probably wait a few more minutes to get started. But for those of you who are already on, I can tell you, we have a session today for you that is chock full of information. And so we want to use every minute possible for all of the things that we want to share with you today. So first of all, I'm Darren Sapanik and I run partnerships at Elevar. And we have a very special program called Expand with Elevar Partners. This is a series of online workshops that we do with our partners based on very relevant, timely, and useful content that we think is going to help the Shopify ecosystem. And we do this with our partners because of certain expertise that they may have. And so today we're honored to have Mia Yumanos from Clickvoyant. She is the founder and CEO of Clickvoyant, one of our favorite partners. And she's going to tell you a little bit about what they do in a second, but a very cool analytics platform. And the way that we've got this formatted today, and I'm going to have the other guys on the that you see, I'm going to have them introduce themselves in a second, but let me just go through the format and how we're going to handle things. This is going to sort of be rapid fire Q&A because between all of us, we came up with a host of questions that we know our Shopify clients have, our partners have on migrating to GA4. And there's probably more than we're going to be able to handle here today, but we're going to try to do as much of it as possible. So this is going to go pretty fast. There's a Q&A tab or, click whatever at the bottom. Use that to input your questions. I'm going to monitor it while John, Mia, and Dorian talk, and I'll be coming in and out, asking questions, bringing topics up for them to discuss. So when you put your question in there, I'll monitor it and try to fit it in as much as possible. But if we don't get to it during the discussion, at the end of the session, we're going to stay on the line and answer as many questions as we can. So feel free to stay on. I think that's it. I am going to stop sharing my screen for a moment. And there we go. And I am going to have our panelists introduce themselves, and then we're going to do a quick introduction for all of you to Elevar and to Clickvoyant. So Mia, why don't I actually, or no, you know what, Mia? I'm going to start with the other two, and then I'll have, then you can introduce you and Clickvoyant. How about that?
Save the best for last, Darren. Do it.
All right. Yes, exactly. All right.
Just kidding, guys.
So, John, why don't you start? Introduce yourself.
Sure. I'm John Cairo. I'm the solutions engineer at Elevar.
And Dorian.
I'm Dorian. I work as a web analytics specialist at Elevar. I'm more on the technical side. I set up the tracking and things like that. So,
and for everyone on the line, both John and Dorian have done lots in terms of working with our clients on GA4 migrations and setting all kinds of things up. So there are experts from Elevar. And Mia.
Hey everyone, I'm Mia, CEO of Clickvoyant and former director of analytics for JWT and Omnicom agencies.
All right, and I'm going to go back and share my screen just for a moment again. And we're going to give you just kind of 2 seconds of, there we go. Okay, So we're going to go that. Okay, you got that. Actually, Mia, 1 second. I'll do a little intro for Elevar, and then I'll take it to you. Okay. So for those of you who are not familiar with Elevar, essentially our job is to provide you with the maximum amount of first-party data from your clients and users, first click on the ad to final conversion. And what we do is get you the most highly relevant and most accurate data that you can then use in making your decisions for how your ad dollars are going to be spent, or perhaps how you're going to update your site to have maximum conversion rate optimization. So it's our job to collect the data, and then we send it back to all of your channels so that they all have accurate data to work with. So for example, if any of you have ever found that your Facebook data and your Shopify data don't match up, we make sure that that happens. We make sure everyone has 100% accurate data. And the result of that is ultimately that things like the Facebook algorithm can work so much better for you. Your relevancy factor goes way up, your ROAS goes up, the cost of acquisition goes down, because good data in, good results out. All right, and Mia.
Awesome. So Clickvoyant is a product that actually likes to receive good data and analyze all of it for what is leading to ultimate conversions on your website. So if you think about, all the clean data that is in your upper funnel with Facebook ads and Google ads, there's also all that clean data that's happening on your e-commerce store. So what we do is receive the data from Google Analytics and Google Ad Network, and then look for the opportunities for incremental revenue. So Clickvoyant is an insight bot that sits on top of your clean data systems that Elevar provides, and it saves hundreds of hours of analytics time. So as an analytics director, you would typically have to hire somebody to do this for you, have to hire an agency to do this for you. The real fruit of analytics is the insight, and that insight usually has to be some kind of product of statistical research. So what Clickvoyant does is automate that, gets you this presentation in 10 minutes to get to your stakeholders, and all of them is just chock full of insights that are leading to conversion rate opportunities. The problems that we solve are things like, okay, I'm a merchant and I've got tons of data. I can't really get my arms around all of it. And so once you get into a place where you've got your data clean and cleaned up from Elevar, then Clickvoyant can then automate what you would typically have to get an analyst for, and those salaries increasing 10% every year due to a $200 billion gap in talent. There's just not enough people in the universe to do the amount of work that the data creates. So companies that are boxed out of that talent usually find themselves doing things like, let's give analytics as a side hustle to the merchandiser. Let's give it as a side hustle to the CRO person or the digital marketing manager, when that person has a lot of other tasks to do and strategy to create. Clickvoyant is the right hand when you don't have 150,000 salary headcount to spend or compete for an analytics talent market.
All right, now, actually, I'm going to, no, you know what? Let me leave this up for the moment, guys. And what I want to do first, it's really important for everyone to understand, why is Google even doing this, right? Because I know that there's very few people out there that don't know anymore, I got to do this. But really, why? What's the benefit? Where's Google going with all of this? What makes this such an imperative that they've placed this deadline on everybody? And by the way, everyone, the deadline is hard, and it is July 1, right?
Yeah.
July 1, 2023, a hard date for the cutoff. So let's just first, maybe Mia, you can start. What is the general reason for doing all of this?
Well, let me start, Darren, by just reminding July 1 is 2 months away, essentially. Like from today, you're probably going to take a moment to get your team together, and maybe it takes 2 weeks to kind of figure out who's going to do this. So you really actually have 2 months to get it done. And it's probably at minimum at its base level, 30 days of work. And that's for basics. So everybody who hasn't done it, move now. Okay, that's my end of the PSA. Why are they doing it? It's because I think, so, Google will come out and say, oh, well, you can benefit from a lot of these things. We have there's, the explosion of AI, this structured data set of GA3 doesn't really support this whole AI trend. And so GA4 allows us to benefit from more, machine learning technologies, to be able to give it to other computers to read and to get the data more accurate and more robust. On the other side there is a privacy concern. So we've got GDPR, we've got CCPA, consumers are more and more concerned about how businesses are using their data. And so GA4 also has some privacy features in it that allow the users more control.
Okay, all right. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a second here because there's some other topics that I'm going to have you guys talk about. But what, for everybody that's looking, what you're seeing here, right, are all of the differences in how the data is set up between GA3 and GA4. And we're actually going to do some dives into this. And so I'm going to stop sharing for just a moment here. Okay. And whoops, sorry. Okay. So let me ask Dorian. Let's go to you for a second here. Everyone is concerned, right, about the differences between their data in UA, GA3 versus GA4. And I know that that fear of what happens with my data that I've got in UA, if I have to make this migration, what's going to happen? What do I do? Why don't we start a discussion with you on that?
Right. So from what we know until now, the data from the UA properties is not transferable to the GA4 properties. This is also because the data model is different. They are not compatible with one another. So what Google will do is that it will just deprecate the universal analytics property. Honestly, I'm not sure if on the 1st of July or whenever they will just stop giving access to the UA properties. But yeah, just to make sure you have the historical data. And if you need to know different things that happened in the past and have a year-over-year overview, it is best to just back up your data in some way. There are currently some methods to do it. One of them, an easy one, would be just to use Google Sheets. There is an add-on, you can just download it, but that is quite messy if you have a lot of data and so on. The next best thing would be the BigQuery. So to transfer the data to BigQuery. However, this is only available for the GA360 properties for now. So for the GA360 accounts for free. So I guess not a lot of us use GA360. The other option would be to just use a third-party connector. There are quite a few online. Some are more expensive, some are cheaper. There are also some workarounds that wouldn't cost anything from what I saw. But having the data in BigQuery would be really great if you want to access it later. Again, it is a new tool, BigQuery, for a lot of us, so we will need to get used to that as well, how to use it, how to view the data. But yeah, this is one main point there.
One of the questions that I know I've received a lot from people, and you can keep going on that subject too, John, but that is, are people going to be able to run UA in parallel with GA4 for any period of time? And go ahead, John.
Sure. So I just want to knock on what Dorian was talking about. We know that you'll have access to your Universal Analytics property for at least 6 months. That's what we've been told. And I think it says that in the Universal Analytics doc. So you'll be able to go and look, but you can't send data after July 1st. So you'll still be able to go do some analysis, but after that date, you can no longer send events. As far as I'll jump on that question of UA and GA4 in parallel, you can do it. We actually do it all the time. One important way to think about all this stuff is it's not, we say migration, but it's not really a migration. To me, a migration is kind of like a merging of one property into another, and that gets really confusing. That's
Good
not
point.
that's not what's happening in these properties. You're basically starting a brand new property, connecting all the data to that property, and then essentially running them in parallel, like Darren just asked. And then your Universal Analytics property is going to go to the graveyard in 6 months or so. I think GA360 has more visibility. I think you're going to get like a year, if I remember correctly. I don't know if you guys remember.
Yeah,
maybe
it's July 2024.
Okay, so you get a little bit more time with your data, but the same problem exists. You have to either get it out of Universal Analytics or, let it die.
Yeah, and I'm going to add on to that because I think the reality is like okay, so checking the metrics today, only 25% of global sites that had GA3 migrated, or not migrated, John, but switched or included GA4. And if you want to, so you really only have now till July 1 to run it in parallel. And that's pretty important because the way that the architecture of the data is, because it's so different, you're going to want to know the delta between these two different, fundamentally different systems. What is the delta? I mean, we're only going to get 2 months. You're not even getting year over year at this point. So you're just going to know a concurrent 2 months of what it should look like to help you eyeball what the future is going to look like for you. Because if you turn it off, if what I think the other 75% who haven't switched is going to do is say, okay, well, here's June data in GA3, and now here's July data in GA4. Oh my God, it's completely different. We went way up, we went way down, or we implemented it wrong. So like, you're not going to know. It's not apples to apples in our favorite industry analogy. It isn't apples to apples. It is apples to oranges. And you will have no visibility on what the difference is if you don't do it before July 1.
Very good point. Are you recommending that people put their data in BigQuery or something beforehand, or from UA, I mean?
I mean, so the reason why you would want to do that is because you want to preserve your data beyond the 6 months, if that Google will allow you to. So that's really more of a preservation to know like my year over year activity. When Google Analytics 3 goes bye-bye, like shut down, you can't log in. When we talk about, in a BigQuery, like the companies that will benefit from that is larger, more than, let's say, $10 million in annual revenue. Say you're spending more than like $20,000 in media, you probably do want to do that.
Okay, all right.
If you are smaller than that, you're probably going to get away with Google Sheets. And the things that you want to do for a 12-month period is channels, sessions, transactions. I mean, you kind of can solution based on your company size and what is the appropriate amount of data for that size.
Let me ask you guys, just as a, you can each answer quickly, whatever. I know that there's something called the auto migrate, I think, from Google. Should people do that? And I think it's like this one click, right? Like, and it seems a little, that doesn't sound like, because this is a lot more complicated than that. So what happens, and should people ignore it? Mia, we'll start with you.
Oh, I'm just going to say 2 thumbs down and let John talk.
Yeah, I agree. Dorian probably has more background than I do, but I know that when we do our analyst meetings and this topic comes up, the same 2 thumbs down sentiment is there. We don't do this. Dorian, maybe you can fill in some of like the details on why.
Yeah, so it depends on what data are you tracking. First of all, we have seen situations with customers that did this and it just affected their GA4 tracking in general. Also, some people did add like the GA4 tag on their website and then they still used that. Some events were double counting, so I haven't seen honestly one website where this was perfectly transitioned from UA to G4. So it is just better to have the tracking set up accordingly as it should have been previously using the tags and just make sure it's working as expected.
And I'll throw in another voice because I did go to see what the date of the auto migrations were from the Google website. In the developer tools, Google has a big red line says, we don't recommend you let us do this. So that's the tell.
There you go. And question answered. Thank you. Okay, one final question on this whole sort of general migration. Mia tells us that only 25% of you have even done this yet. For the other 75%, based on the first 25%, how long should they expect it to take? What should they be planning for right now?
That is.
And I know every site is different, of course. Every business is different. Every site is different, but you know.
I mean, in our experience, if you're like a standard merchant with a template and, you know, like these standard templates and not a lot of third-party integrations, you're probably going to be able to get this done pretty quickly, especially if you partner with Elevar, because you get all that robust behavioral data. And we'll get to why that's important in a minute. But, you know, the Shopify plugin is live. So, okay, minimally, the Shopify plugin is live. You're going to get your e-commerce transactions. Just go ahead and push that button today. The other thing is like, you know, when you get into behavioral data, you get into conversion rate optimization. You can't, you know, just throwing media at like pages that don't work, not the best strategy. So when you have behavioral data, like what Elevar provides, now you can get into more interesting user insights about why they're buying things, why they're leaving their cart and that kind of stuff. So that is a pretty quick turnaround with Elevar as well. And then if you do like the full scope thing where I've got a call center, I've got a subscription, I've got all these other things. If you have these other third-party integrations, you're going to want to give yourself at least 6 weeks. And that's assuming you have a plan.
Right, exactly. John and Dorian, what have your experiences been with clients you guys have been helping?
Dorian, you want to take it first?
Sure. So it depends. A lot of customers come to us specifically for GA4 tracking. They heard about this transition. So we can set it up for them. I don't know if they purchase an expert installation, we can set it up within a week. They can also do it without our assistance, should be straightforward directly from the app. So for the e-commerce tracking, this should be pretty easy. Then there are other things to take into consideration. There are some settings that you might want to change. There are different things you want to look into. We'll probably discuss about this, but maybe you have some channel grouping set up in some way in Universal Analytics. You might want to use these in the GA4 properties as well. So you want your data to be quite similar with the behavior events as well. You need to like either migrate these events as they are, or just have a plan on how to do it, since the data collection is quite different than how Universal Analytics did it. So yeah, in general, it depends from business to business on their needs, on the complexity of, as Mia mentioned, other integrations and so on.
Yeah, and I don't know if I can add anything to me or Dorian's statements other than just to sum up. I think whether you're using Elevar or not, you can get the baseline e-commerce data in really quickly. You can put in your GA or your GA4 property ID into the Shopify plugin or to us and probably get the baseline done in a day. So it's not a huge hurdle, but it's all the details that come after that take a lot of time. Auditing the property, behavioral events, like Mia said, moving your custom dimensions over. So hard to say exactly, but I think you can get to the point where your boss isn't mad at you pretty quickly. And then the details might take a while.
Very good point. All right. So now we're going to start to move into some of the nitty gritties because we need to start to establish for folks all of the differences between UA and GA4. And there are plenty of them. So I'm going to start to bombard you guys with, okay, give me some of the answers to these questions, right? And we'll try to just hammer through as fast as we can because there's so much. So let's start first. There's structured and unstructured data. Okay, tell me what the differences are with GA4. How is that all changing? Anyone can start. John, you start.
So this was a point that actually Mia brought up, so I'm not gonna talk too much about it. I want to get her opinion on it. But to me, like my interpretation of this is we have something called a schema. That's just the way data is laid out or put together. You could call it like the shape of the data. Details that you probably don't really need to know. They're sort of behind the scenes. Okay. But the moral of the story is the schema of the data, the structure is simple in GA4 and complicated and oddly interconnected in universal analytics. And that makes for difficulties in analysis. And I'm sure Mia could talk all day about machine learning on that type of data, but maybe Mia can enlighten us a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, so when I talk to merchants about this, I typically just liken it to GA3 is something that Google had, designed for marketers who were not very data literate in architecture and what they needed. And so they architected in a way that can make it easy for a marketer to get their insights out. And GA4 is something highly complex in terms of like how we can, program it, what we need to feed the data systems, how we architect it. It's ultimately flexible. So I always say GA3 is a model home, not exactly perfect, not exactly the fixtures you like, but whatever, it works and it's cheap. Then the other thing is, okay, GA4 is a house taken down to the studs. You could do it as you like. All of the things, but you got to hire the carpenter, the designer, the architect, and you got to get it. So you have to put in the thought and the planning and the investment in getting it right.
Okay. All right. Very interesting. All right. I know that there is a difference between events and sessions in GA4, and I know this comes up a lot with our clients. I'll start with you, Mia. Can you describe that for folks on the line?
This is like single-handedly the most confusing thing to merchants and marketers, I feel like, because they're like, oh, well, a conversion rate is based on a session. Well, yes, but those are not readily available inside GA4. I mean, sessions are available, but to get the conversion rates out, you have to start calculating. And so the way to think about it is, a session-based session-based structure allows you kind of drill in and zoom out for a marketer, for analysis. Event-based are things that we're saying, okay, this is a page view, a video view, a click to here, a swipe, a gallery view, a product detail view. All of these things are kind of like Lincoln logs down on the ground, and you have to kind of build them up in the way to get what you need as far as customer insight. So every event has this new structure where you can add a parameter, meaning what I call metadata. So of that page view, you have to add, or your product detail view or add to cart, you have to add the metadata. What was it? What was its price? What's its shipping cost? What was it? Was there a coupon? And that is all things that we have to manually program now. So So if you liken it, when I describe this to marketers, what you used to know in the universe of GA3 was category action label for all of the events, custom events, and you were limited to these 3 things that you could add. Now you are unlimited and you can name them whatever you want. Or actually, it's not actually unlimited. I think the parameters are 16 or something like per event. So now it's very flexible, but you again have to program it.
Okay, so then that taxonomy basically is event name and event parameters, and you can set it up the way you want to. So that flexibility is to your advantage in being able to more specifically, I guess, or more finely monitor what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. So for example, like, and I think, we talked about this yesterday, Dorian, Dorian likes to go category action label as the events parameters in GA4. And that's a great transition for just helping marketers, get their brain from like one place to another place.
Mhm.
Other ways to do it, and the way we like to do it is to say, okay, this is a video view. We're going to name the action, the event, a video view. So all the actions in GA3, we're making our events. So it's a video view. The video view has the parameters of title, time, like video time or title, length, page that they were on, and the click-through. So now I have
Okay.
4 new or 5 new things that I can add to that event. So that's what I'm
Okay.
saying. It's, again, think about model home versus house to the studs. I could do whatever I want, but it means it requires planning and thinking of how we're going to use this data.
And so, Dorian, when you have been setting up in a different way, like I think it's really interesting for people to know that this is really there's the ability to set this up the way they want to track and view it, correct? Right. And so, Dorian, what is, as Mia was saying, you had an alternate way of setting it up.
Right. So we at Elevar looked into different situations, like different use cases for our customers on how to do it. And we started by asking our customers, like, what do they actually want to track and want to know? But most of them, the issue was that they didn't have a plan for this. So they weren't sure what data to be collected. They weren't sure what parameters to use to each event, and it was getting a lot more complicated. And this is because for years, marketers were used to using what the universal analytics properties provided, which is event category, event action, and event label. So for now, we just started replicating the same reports in GA4, which still brings a lot of data. But of course, it is up to every business on how they want to do it. They just need to understand, as Mia mentioned, you can send a lot more parameters. This is a lot more flexible. But yeah, it requires a lot more planning to know how to use the data after that.
Right, exactly.
And I think,
Oh, go ahead.
Darren, one of the bottom line, or one of the bottom lines for people using the system is the reporting. When you have good event data, is way more sophisticated than what you could ever do in universal analytics. So you can do funnel reporting, and you can exclude people who added a red shirt and look at, what happens after somebody adds something that's not red, or it's extremely flexible. And that just wasn't, that's not even close to possible in universal analytics. So like beyond all this event stuff and the difference in structures, the bottom line, like what it means at the end of the day is better reporting, but slightly more difficult to set up.
Okay, and I'm going to come back actually to that topic, because there's a lot more that I want to ask you guys about, basically setting up the metrics and what you should be collecting and why and what you should look at. But before we do that, there's a few more data points I think we need to cover for people. One of those is behavioral events, which Mia mentioned quite a bit at the beginning. And that's sort of a whole different can of worms, I guess, if you will. And so I don't know, maybe John, or can you start with setting up those behavioral events, but not just setting them up, but why people want to and need to set up those behavioral events. I know that it's obvious to everyone why they need to set up the key e-commerce events, but there's a lot of value that comes beyond that.
100%. Yeah. So you can think of the events as kind of in two categories. There's the e-com events that we all know and love, like the purchase and the add to cart, all that good stuff. And then there's behavioral events, which sometimes aren't tracked at all. Lots of merchants that we work with come into us and they don't track anything. But these would be like, let's say you have a swatch selector on your site, and you want to know when people are clicking. I don't know why all my examples are revolving around color today, but you want to know when people are clicking on a different color for a shirt or something like that. You might want to know about that in GA. Like you might want to know what happens when you look at somebody who does something like that. How do they differ in behavior to somebody who doesn't use the swatch selector, or potentially are people using the swatch selector? So those events need to be tracked outside the context of, you know, the Shopify native GA4 plugin or even the Elevar plugin. They don't just get tracked. They need to be done manually. We have a couple ways of doing it, like, and you can do it too. You can do it in GTM. You can use our click tracker to do it. Or when you come through and do a setup with us, we'll also set them up. But those events are, as you get more advanced, those events get increasingly important. And Mia had some good examples. Like our CRO team relies on them extremely heavily. And one of the big gripes from Brad, our founder, is that you still can't get these metrics along with conversion rates in GA4, which is something that you can get in Universal Analytics. But this sort of leans on the CRO side. And maybe Mia, I know you have some experience with people needing these events. Maybe you want to fill in some details.
This is like my favorite thing about website data and behavioral data. So, you know, Clickvoyant was originally built to just solve the problem of like reporting out, right? Like in an analytics environment, we have to report, we do these monthly things. But what we found was like 30% of our customers were using it for CRO, for hypothesis generation. So they were just, and, you know, and they're finding like 2 times ROI, like 26% incremental revenue because they're testing. And, you know, every merchant should be testing, number one, but you don't, rather than going out like throwing spaghetti at the wall, I want to do a PDP page, or I want to do my homepage, or the data can start pointing you in the directions. Like when you find things that are correlated, like a swatch, like a, you know, signing up for your newsletter, you want to know of all these things that we're doing, all the behaviors that are, you know, manifesting on your e-commerce store, what of them are correlated to lifetime value?
Yeah.
Like maybe the purchase, but like more extensively lifetime value. And without having that data, you're kind of shooting in the dark. And actually, as my chief operator, I said, you're just guessing. And, you know, all of this activity is actually available. They're doing it. You should be collecting that data. And that's what leads to the 26% incremental revenue. And who doesn't want that?
Right, exactly. Yeah, there's so much more on the site that you can learn from to improve everything about that user experience. Right.
Right. Think about how much
yes,
like a grocery store tracks your chart, where you go, like who are you picking up stuff off, merchandising, how much a regular retail store tracks what we do when we go there. That's what you should be treating in your e-commerce property too.
All right, thank you. Okay, something called channel groupings, I believe, and I might be mistaken here, but I believe is brand new for GA4. Is that correct? Okay, so can you explain what those are and why that is a fundamental element in GA4, or how it works as a fundamental element?
Sure. So I can jump in here. So channel groups were already a feature in Universal Analytics.
Oh, okay.
lot for a long time. In GA4, this was requested so many times because it wasn't available, it wasn't customizable. There were the channel groups, but they weren't customizable. So this is
Oh,
where
that's the
was.
difference. Okay, thank you.
So the channel groups, what it does basically is that you can use like the attribution data, like specific source, medium, the UTM parameters, mostly source, medium, campaign, ad content, and so on. And then group these by channels. GA4 already has some default channels, and they try to automatically attribute these to specific groups. But then there are a lot of customers that do not use the same format required by Google in order for these to be attributed automatically. And a lot of these was showing up as unassigned for the merchants. And now with this new feature they just released, I think 1 or 2 weeks ago, it is possible to change the rules basically, so you can either customize the different source medium campaigns to go to a specific group, or you can just create new ones, and it is, I guess, much easier for marketers to see like how the data looks for a particular group of for their marketing efforts, instead of just going through each source medium like on a more granular basis, so they can see the overview, and then they can dig deeper by looking at other dimensions.
So I'll turn this for you, Mia or John. So is there a difference in how attribution works then between GA4 and UA?
Yeah, I mean, well, okay, so the number one thing is like if you log into, if anybody actually has a GA4 account, you'll see that there is a lot of different new default channels. So for example, like before in GA3, like you see, and it's like direct, I think there are 5, direct, organic search, paid media, blah, blah. Now there's like 18. So it's organic search, organic video, organic social, and then paid and display. And so there are a lot of new ways. And there's also, and I haven't dug into this very much because Clickvoyant is primarily product analytics. So what's happening in store, not so much upper funnel. But it does seem like there are better opportunities to exchange between last click and other models. Like my favorite model that we would do using multi-channel funnel in GA3 was the bathtub. Is to do, give like a 40% credit to the introducer, 40% credit to the channel that closed the deal, and then distribute evenly the dollars of 20% across all the other touch points. So I don't know if have you taken a look at any of that, Dorian or John, but those are the things that I find, honestly, that I think this is a development, because having 5 channels isn't really getting into the detail. I mean, as an analytics like consultant, like we were always making default channel groupings that said organic social. We were kind of manually creating those in GA3, where now they're kind of out of the box in GA4.
Right. Okay. John, do you want to add anything about, 1, attribution, but 2, really also what Elevar generally recommends in terms of attribution setup, like what you're tracking? Are you tracking last click, or should you split it out amongst the channels?
So last click was the default for universal analytics, so that's what everybody's used to. Last click's pretty simple. It's just the very last click that had a campaign associated. So if somebody clicks a Google ad and makes a purchase, the purchase gets credited to the Google ad. But if they clicked a Facebook ad before the Google ad, like Mia said, that should probably get some credit. But in the universal analytics world, unless you change settings and do some digging, you're looking at just Google ads taking credit for that purchase. In GA4, there's a new model called data-driven attribution, which is really super cool. Unfortunately, it's not really like shot through the whole system. It's just in certain parts. But if you're in GA4 and you go to the advertising tab and look at the model comparisons, in that area, you're seeing data-driven out of the box. It's the standard. In other reports, I just want to be super clear here because there's been confusion inside of Elevar about this. In a lot of the other reports, you're not seeing data-driven models. You're just seeing the source and medium that was associated with the event or the session or the user in general, what started the user's journey. But data-driven attribution is this wild thing that kind of does all these permutations of different pathways that a user can come through to make a purchase. And then it decides like what portion of the purchase should we allocate to, going back to the scenario of the Facebook ad and the Google ad. Should we give credit to Facebook? Because if Facebook's always involved and then Google takes the assist, then we need to figure out like, let's allocate 50% of the credit to Facebook and 50% to Google ads. Or maybe only once or twice Facebook was involved. And again, there'll be a decision made that this really doesn't have anything to do with the sale and we should credit Google ads completely. So there's like a lot of interesting logic that's happening now behind the scenes. Unfortunately, like I said, it's not everywhere. So make sure if you want to see this information, go to the advertising tab, go to the model comparison, and you can actually see the difference, like what it would look like if it was last click and what it would look like if it was data driven.
So with the data driven, is that algorithm, if you will, right? That intelligence behind it, that's from Google. Are you having to set anything up to, okay, so you don't have to, you can just set it up for data driven, you can see it and it's going to take into that account. So then, for example, if I've got a user that clicked on the Facebook ad, came to the site, went around, failed, went back to the site, I sent them an email. They, with a special offer, they ultimately clicked on the email, went back to the site and purchased. Every step of the way, it's going to say, okay, who really deserves the primary credit? Yeah, the email was the final click, but it doesn't really deserve all, the bulk of the credit like it would for last click in that case.
Exactly.
Okay.
Gosh, I'm putting my analytics director hat on, and I probably shouldn't because we have an application to be a Google certified partner. But when it's a black box and Google's in charge, who makes money from ads, to tell you who it's attributed to, I'd be a little bit concerned. I mean, I like statistical models, obviously, but those are just like attribution is such a hot topic. We could do this all day, a whole other webinar. But I think that one thing that's like beneficial about data-driven modeling, I think that it gives people another alternative that's like out of the box that they could look at easily.
Right.
And because I think we all know, if we don't have the data necessarily, this is a data person telling you, we don't have the data to tell us what the combinations are necessarily of how all the permutations for how people to come to purchase from us. We all know it's not last click. Like we all know it's not last click. So I think the modeling, just Google having that out there to have an example of a model is good. But I do think I bet there's lots of other things too that are coming out of the woodwork that help kind of with attribution. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, and if you have me a standpoint on this, you can change it to last click. You don't have to see this. You can change the whole property to last click or whatever you want. But out of the box, it's data driven.
Oh yeah, no, I don't want to go back there. But I do feel like as long as we're like AI crazy right now, let's all just remember we know they all do different things and they're all different models. So we have to learn how they work.
Yeah, and the other thing I just want to quickly mention is if your channel groupings that we just discussed aren't set up properly, then these attribution models, the way they're presented in GA4 are not very useful.
Oh, very interesting. Okay, good note. Thank you, John. All right, we don't have a lot of time left, and I know we had discussed all kinds of other topics, but I'm going to have you guys very quickly, each of you, comment on basically just reporting how to, you know, what you might want to start. You don't have to get a deep, I don't want to do a deep dive because reporting would be a whole hour-long discussion, but just, you know, set up for people what they should be considering as they start to approach what to do with that data that's in GA4 and setting up the reports, what to look for, if there's anything that you guys highly recommend in terms of the metrics they should be looking at, the data analysis they've got to make, like, or if there's tools or types of reports. So I'll just go around. I'll start with you, John, your comments on reporting, and we'll just get something from everyone.
Sure, really quickly, I'd say set up a basic user journey report. So if you have the events, set up a report that starts at a view collection, goes to a view product, goes to an add to cart, and goes to a purchase. Not because that report is extremely valuable, but because you'll get a sense of what you can do in GA4. You build a funnel, and then you can start like doing some thinking and see what you really want to see. I'll stop there.
All right, great, thank you. Mia.
Okay, first and foremost, my only thing that I'll say reporting is get out of GA4. Go in, put it into Looker Studio. It's a free tool. So, I mean, that will require some other things like documentation, knowing what you want to do, what your KPIs are, but get the data out of GA4 for now and put it into Looker Studio where it can be more easily manipulated and go beyond just volumes of stuff.
Okay. And Dorian.
Yeah, I don't know really what to add here. Yeah, Looker Studio is really helpful, just because I feel like GA4 is still quite limited in creating the reports there, making them more visually appealing. What else can I say? What should be tracked? Like basic, like for e-commerce stores, for sure, basic e-commerce tracking and making sure that is set up correctly. And then behavior tracking, like for someone just starting with this and like wanting to make some conversion rate optimization on their site. Yeah, I would recommend just starting with a plan and making sure they know what data they should collect. So do not just like set up the tracking on everything and everywhere and then get lost in the data.
What about cross-domain tracking? You know, so if you've got multiple, you know, regional sites or multiple brands, or maybe you're going from, I don't know, different, anyways, you get anything about that?
So cross-domain tracking in GA4 is quite easier than doing it in Universal Analytics.
That's like the one thing that's easier.
The
one thing that they gave us.
So yeah, if you want to make sure that you're tracking the whole journey from one website to another, for example, you have international websites, different domains, and you want to track the whole journey, you just need to add the GA4 tag, the GA4 snippet, and then add the domains to the property settings in GA4. From there, it should just work as expected.
Okay, now we're going to close out, and then we'll stop. There were no questions that were coming in, so I'm going to allow then for folks to either leave or we'll stay on for a few minutes and we'll answer some additional questions. But here's how I'm going to close it. Ready? I want each of you to give one piece of advice to all those merchants out there on what they need to do or consider as they take this leap into GA4. So Dorian, I'll start with you. No pressure.
Yeah, so I guess the main thing is just to be open-minded and understand that it is something different. It's something that requires a bit of learning. So yeah, that would be the main thing that.
Yep, that is good advice, actually. Yep. Mia.
So I'm going to go back to, you know, what my mom would always tell me when I had a difficult situation, even as an 8-year-old, is to get out a spreadsheet. Get out your good old spreadsheet, and here are the columns. Things I want to track. When that thing should be, like the button click, the thing, we call that the trigger for that. What I want to track, what is the trigger? And then how does that get into GA4? Those 3 columns, don't go more than 20. And you're going to be that's when we talk about the plan, that's a very good starter plan.
Okay.
Frida the dog agrees.
Again, John.
I have a really specific one. Go to the data settings, go to data retention, and turn your event data retention to 14 months.
Yeah, there you go.
And that's stolen. That's stolen from Dorian. It's really Dorian's little tip. But yeah, if you don't do that, we've seen lots of people who set up a property, send data, and then when they're doing their custom reports, they only have 2 months to look back on, which obviously kind of stinks. Yeah.
And I will close by letting everybody know that one, Elevar does have a service. I think Dorian was alluding to this earlier. If you're an Elevar client, so you're on one of our subscription plans, and you're a new client, we've got an expert install in GA4 setup. If you're an existing client, we've got something called the GA4 tune-up, and we'll go in and help you get GA4 set up. It's so important right now. We added this just recently because of the overwhelming need and demand to get GA4 set up. And Mia, from Clickvoyant's standpoint, is there anything you would like to add in terms of what you guys are doing right now to help folks get themselves set?
Yeah, so our first Google Analytics 4 automated analysis will be out on Cinco de Mayo. So once you have your data all clean and ready to go, I mean, you could go in there now. It works on GA3, but once you have your data all clean and set up in GA4, then come to us after May 5th.
All right, very cool. I want to thank the 3 of you and also everyone that was that was on today. We really, really appreciate you taking the time to do this. I'm going to show you a slide right now so you can get in touch with us if you need to. I hope you found this valuable. Please watch for other Expand with Elevar Partners webinar series coming out. And good luck, everyone, with your GA4 move, not migration. All right, thank you all. And we'll stay on for a couple of seconds here. I'm going to keep the recording on just in case anybody does want to ask a question before we log off for sure. So we'll just hold on for 1 second here. And everyone can feel free to put your questions in the Q&A. And thank you guys, that was super, super good, really informative. And for anyone else that's still on, I forgot to mention, we will have the recording available. Here's a question about Looker Studio. This person does not really know anything about it. Is there anything special that you can just, say that they obviously they can go and research it and everything, but is there something special that you would want to let somebody know that doesn't know anything about it?
I would just say that that is free. Number one, that's the most important thing. It is a Google product. So A, it's free, B, it's a Google product. So the data works nicely with it, but it allows you to do calculations and kind of see kind of what a typical analyst would do is kind of make a dashboard for you. It is a free dashboarding tool.
Okay, great.
You can get what you need to know out of GA4 without having to dig in there too much.
Okay. All right, I'm going to close this webinar. Thank you all very much and have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Darren.
Thanks,
Bye,
everybody.